New York City had always buzzed with an energy that felt just shy of supernatural. But no one truly believed in ghosts until the library incident on 42nd Street. Down in the marble silence of the New York Public Library, books flew from shelves, cards ejected from catalogs like missiles, and a terrified librarian fled breathlessly into daylight. The city didn't know it yet, but something ancient had begun to stir. Three eccentric scientists, Peter Venkman, Raymond Stantz, and Egon Spengler, were the first to answer the call. They weren't heroes. They were parapsychologists fired from Columbia University, relegated to chasing whispers and reading psychic energy levels from gadgets held together by duct tape and obsession. But Ray's enthusiasm, Egon's brilliance, and Peter's irreverent charm made for an unlikely trinity. Using the last of Ray's mortgage money, they founded Ghostbusters Incorporated in an old firehouse downtown. Janine Melnitz, sharp-tongued and unflappable, manned the phones. And when the first real call came in, from a haunted hotel dripping with ectoplasm, they found themselves face to face with something impossible. Slimer. Green, gluttonous, grotesque, and entirely real. They caught it with proton packs and sheer disbelief. Suddenly, the Ghostbusters were city-wide celebrities. Television interviews, magazine spreads, and long queues of terrified clients flooded their tiny headquarters. But behind the fame, the spiritual turbulence was escalating. Ancient energy began to pulse through the city's veins. Dana Barrett, a cellist living in a Central Park high-rise, found her groceries erupting with spectral menace. Eggs fried themselves on the counter. A demonic dog statue seemed to watch her breathe. And in her fridge, a name echoed through dimensions, Zul. Venkman took the case personally. Charmed by Dana and suspicious of her claims, he investigated her apartment. Egon's meters screamed with warning. The building was constructed by Ivo Shander, a mad architect and leader of a doomsday cult. His purpose was to act as a spiritual antenna, a gateway. As the barrier between worlds weakened, Dana was possessed by Zul, the gatekeeper. Her neighbor Louis Tully, a bumbling accountant, became the keymaster, possessed by Vince Clortho. Together, they were meant to summon Gozer the Gozerian, a Sumerian god of destruction. Just as the Ghostbusters prepared for battle, they were shut down by EPA agent Walter Peck, who deemed their containment grid hazardous. When the grid was deactivated, spectral chaos flooded Manhattan. Ghosts of every shape and time spilled into the streets. The mayor had no choice but to beg the Ghostbusters for help. Clad in jumpsuits, armed with proton packs, they climbed to the top of Dana's building. There, lightning tore the sky as Gozer appeared. They asked Gozer to choose its form. Gozer responded by becoming the first thing Ray thought of, something harmless. Something from his childhood. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. 100-foot titan of sugar and smiling menace stomped through the city. In a desperate final move, the team crossed the streams of their proton packs, previously considered suicidal, to close the gate. They succeeded. Gozer was banished. Dana and Louis were freed. And the city, covered in marshmallow ash, hailed them as saviors. But the veil between worlds had been pierced, and in its breach other shadows waited. Years later, the Ghostbusters found themselves sidelined by lawsuits and city bureaucracy. They were banned from operating. The world, ever forgetful, dismissed their warnings. Ray ran a bookstore. Winston Zeddemore, who had joined the team during the Gozer crisis, went corporate. Peter drifted. Only Egon remained vigilant, watching for signs. Those signs came in the form of pink slime flowing beneath the city. A river of psychomagnetheric ectoplasm fed by human emotion, negativity, rage, despair. It pulsed toward the Manhattan Museum of Art, where a painting of 16th-century tyrant Vigo the Carpathian began to whisper. Vigo sought rebirth through Dana's infant son, Oscar. The Ghostbusters reassembled, recharged. They discovered the slime could be turned good by positivity, by music, by hope. In the finale, they marched the Statue of Liberty down Fifth Avenue, powered by good vibes and Jackie Wilson. They confronted Vigo and, with the strength of renewed unity, defeated him. Oscar was saved. The city remembered. For a time, years turned. Ghosts grew quieter. The team disbanded once more. Egon, believing the greatest threat was yet to come, fled to a dirt farm in Oklahoma. He died alone, unloved, labeled a madman. But he was right. His estranged daughter Callie inherited the farmhouse, moving there with her children, Phoebe and Trevor. The house was strange, full of gadgets, secrets, and a ghost that watched over them. Phoebe, brilliant and awkward, found Egon's hidden lab. She followed his trail. When seismic activity plagued the town of Somerville, Phoebe realized her grandfather had been holding back something ancient. Gozer. Again. With the help of their teacher Mr. Gruberson and a group of new allies, they uncovered Egon's plan. He had rigged the town as a giant trap. A final stand. When Gozer rose once more, now freed by cultists and corrupted energy, the kids fought. Trevor, Podcast, Lucky, and Phoebe stood where Egon had stood. And in that moment, his ghost appeared. Egon Spengler, silent and luminous, guided Phoebe's hands. The old team arrived, Ray, Peter, Winston, and together they finished what he had started. Gozer was vanquished, not with firepower, but with family, forgiveness, and legacy. Egon faded into light, smiling, and the world turned once more, unaware of how close it had come. But the firehouse lights flickered back on, and in the shadows, something blinked red. The Ghostbusters would be needed again. In the aftermath of Gozer's second fall, Winston Zeddemore stepped into a new role, not just as a Ghostbuster, but as a benefactor. With wealth earned through years of quiet enterprise, he reclaimed the firehouse, restored it, brought it back to life, not as a museum, but as a beacon. Ray returned to running his occult bookstore, still buried in dusty tomes and forgotten knowledge. Peter went back to academia and mischief in equal measure. But Winston saw the future, and the firehouse's heartbeat never truly stopped. Beneath it, the old containment grid still pulsed faintly, holding, barely, and somewhere inside something ancient knocked. Not Gozer, something older, hungrier. Phoebe, now a veteran of spectral warfare at just 12, refused to return to a quiet life. She studied Egon's notes obsessively. She rebuilt his tech, improved it, and tested it on the ghosts that never quite went away. Trevor joined Winston's rebuilding efforts, learning the ins and outs of old gear. Lucky worked Dispatch, Podcast. He went viral. Together, they became the new generation, Ghostbusters 2.0. But while they trained, something waited. In the darkened vaults beneath New York, an artifact long buried in arcane circles stirred. The Death Chill, a Precambrian force said to freeze time itself. Its power radiated outward, icing the edges of dimensions. Tunnels cracked, glass sang with pressure, and in the streets, ghosts whispered of something coming. When the cold started bleeding into the city, the call went out. Phoebe led the charge. They deployed new gear, enhanced proton traps, portable cyclotrons, drones that tracked ectoplasmic footprints. But this wasn't like Gozer. There was no form to destroy, only entropy, decay. An ancient mask was found in the ruins of a condemned subway station. The Mask of Garaka, worn by a Babylonian priest who communed with death and learned to command it. The mask radiated energy that nullified warmth, joy, even memory. Ray and Phoebe uncovered old prophecies pointing to its return. The mask had to be sealed, not shattered. Breaking it would release Garaka completely. But a cult had formed in secret, descendants of Shandor. They believed Garaka could bring ultimate order, cold peace. They broke the seal. The sky darkened. Snow fell in July. And the dead began to walk, not as ghosts, but as echoes. Frozen in their last moments, the team raced to confront the rising threat. Winston coordinated containment. Peter provided the spark of unpredictable genius. Ray mapped the spiritual nexus across Manhattan. And Egon's legacy lived on in Phoebe, who faced Garaka at the epicenter. He was not fire, not flesh. He was absence, a walking erasure. Phoebe, with the others flanking her, created a resonance pulse. Amplified kindness, laughter, love, broadcast directly into Garaka's core. It burned him, not with fire, but with connection. As his form unraveled, he tried to pull Phoebe with him. She fell into the frost. Then a hand reached out. Egon. For a moment, he returned again. He pulled her free, and then he was gone. The city thawed. The ghosts faded. And for once, the firehouse stayed quiet. But not for long. A new artifact was found off the coast of Newfoundland. A relic that pulsed in time with the Earth's core. They called it the Cradle, and it hummed with the sound of 1 billion souls. The Ghostbusters would go global, and the dead, it seemed, were just getting started. The world had changed. The supernatural was no longer confined to New York alleys or ancient Sumerian vaults. It was spreading, surfacing in forgotten villages, beneath crumbling castles, in deserts where time itself unraveled. The cradle was the key. Recovered by deep-sea diverse beneath glacial waters, it pulsed with harmonic frequencies older than language. Scientists called it a natural artifact. The Ghostbusters knew better. It wasn't made. It was born. A spherical cocoon forged of bone-white crystal, smooth to the touch, but impossibly cold. When activated, it projected ghostly images of lives that never existed, alternate timelines, fractured echoes. Entire teams of researchers vanished in its presence. Ray theorized the cradle was a liminal artifact, a node between dimensions. Not a doorway, but a womb. And something inside it wanted to be born. Winston, now leader of the Global Ghostbusters Initiative, deployed teams to investigate similar anomalies across the world. Tokyo reported yokai manifesting from television screens. London's Tower Bridge shuddered with spectral battles from forgotten wars. The Arctic saw lightless storms and whispers in ancient tongues. Phoebe, Trevor, Lucky, and Podcast became the core of the North American division. They trained with relics, read forbidden texts, and upgraded their arsenal with help from a new ally, Dr. Lydia Morrow, a former CERN physicist turned paranormal engineer. She understood the cradle's frequency, but understanding it didn't mean controlling it. The cradle's influence began warping local space-time. Ghosts that had long been quiet were resurrected, not as they were, but corrupted, twisted by exposure to infinite potential timelines. Phoebe saw herself as a villain. Podcast watched his ghostly double dissolve into static. And then the dreamstorms began. Every night, the same vision. The firehouse crumbling. The sky split by light. and a voice, genderless, ancient, echoing from the cradle. One word: return. Egon had mentioned it once, buried in a notebook filled with spirals and equations. The return was not an event. It was a being, a consciousness that had no fixed form. It had been cast out when the universe was young. Its cradle was this earth. When the cradle finally cracked, it wasn't dramatic. Just a hum, then silence, then everything changed. Time collapsed. Ghostbusters across dimensions merged into one point of consciousness. Old enemies reappeared. Slimer became something else, larger, angrier, speaking in riddles. Gozer flickered into being, then bowed before something greater. Reality folded. The firehouse stood at the center of a spiraling vortex, each room leading to a different version of itself across time and possibility. In one, the Ghostbusters never formed. In another, they ruled as gods. In another, Egon still lived. Phoebe ventured into the cradle's core, her proton pack humming in resonance with its song. There she met herself, not a ghost, not a twin, but a mirror forged from grief and hope. They spoke, they fought, and in the end they merged. She emerged changed, her hair glowing faintly, her mind echoing with equations that made the air sing. She was now the anchor, the ghost tether. And with her new understanding, she guided the team to restabilize the cradle. They didn't destroy it. They harmonized with it. Music, laughter, unity, emotions encoded into spectral frequencies, calmed the anomaly. The return faltered. This form never fully arrived. Scattered, defeated not by fire, but by coherence. As the vortex collapsed, each Ghostbuster returned to their rightful world. The firehouse reassembled from light. Time righted itself. And for the first time in centuries, the barriers held. But the cradle remained, buried beneath layers of spiritual insulation. Guarded by Phoebe, watched over by a new generation trained in both science and soul. The world had ghosts. It always would. But now it had protectors. Not just busting spirits, but understanding them. And in that understanding, peace might one day be possible. Even for the dead. Years passed. The firehouse pulsed with quiet purpose. No longer just a base, it was a beacon, a living nexus where science and the afterlife conversed in unbroken code. Phoebe, now in her 20s, led the Ghostbusters with the quiet intensity of someone who had once seen the world break and chose to rebuild it. Her bond with the spectral field was stronger than ever. She could feel the dead in the walls, in the hum of the grid, in the warmth of the light. Trevor had grown into the role of chief engineer, keeping the proton systems balanced, designing new vehicles, new drones, and sometimes things even he didn't understand. Lucky worked as the field commander. Firm, fast, fearless. And Podcast, Ever the Chronicler, had created a global Ghostwatch network, blending citizen science with spiritual vigilance. The world had grown accustomed to the new normal. Ghosts weren't just threats. They were phenomena, mysteries, stories waiting to be heard. And some even wanted to stay. Spirits that helped, protected, haunted in harmony. But not all echoes were kind. In the Siberian wastes, a mining operation unearthed an unnatural rift. A wound in reality. From it emerged no ghosts, only memories, visions of entire lives. Ancient, futuristic, alien. As if the Earth itself remembered every possible past. Phoebe led a team to investigate. They crossed the frozen plains with geothermal gear and spectral harmonics tuned to the rift's frequency. At its heart, they found a figure, wrapped in layers of frost and starlight. A watcher, neither living nor dead, older than thought. It spoke without speaking, impressing thoughts into their minds. The cradle was not unique. It was a fragment, a seed. The watcher claimed there were many across the stars. And Earth was not the only place where the veil grew thin. The cradle had resonated with the others, called out, and something had heard. The stars began to change. Ghost activity surged worldwide. Not local hauntings, but planetary alignment effects. Lunar echoes, solar phantoms. Time-displaced hauntings from the future. The Ghostbusters became more than responders. They were diplomats between planes. Phoebe formed the Astral Accord, a coalition of spiritual leaders, scientists, and sensitives. They met not in embassies, but in sanctified places. Temples, ruins, sites of trauma and peace. They devised a signal, not to call, but to warn, to tell the stars, Earth is aware. Earth remembers. Earth will not be consumed quietly. The Watcher helped build the beacon, a satellite cloaked in quantum uncertainty, pulsed like the cradle once did, but with intent, clarity, defiance. As the beacon launched, ghost activity dipped. The sky shimmered once, twice, then went quiet. The Ghostbusters waited. For days, then weeks. Until one night, every containment grid across the planet surged at once. Not a breach, a response. They weren't alone. Other worlds, other Ghostbusters, other cradles, some victorious, some lost. Phoebe felt them. A chorus of the haunted, not an invasion, conversation, and it had only just begun. The resonance never stopped. Once the beacon spoke to the stars, the echoes became endless. Not a single signal, but billions, layered like chords in a song older than matter. Ghosts no longer appeared as they once had. Not as wandering specters or translucent memories. They came as ideas, structures, cities built from sorrow, floating in the sky, oceans whispering in forgotten tongues. And then the rift opened again. Not in Siberia this time, but beneath New York itself. A yawning chasm under the firehouse, extending through dimensions stacked like playing cards. Phoebe knew it was not random. It was an answer. The universe had heard the call, and now it was sending something back. Winston gathered the originals. Ray, older now, still curious, still fearless. Peter, reluctantly heroic. Dana returned too, no longer the bystander, but a psychic in her own right. They stood alongside the new generation, shoulder to shoulder. And together they descended. The rift wasn't darkness. It was light, blinding, searing, unfiltered potential. They walked through moments frozen in stasis, times that might have been, a world where Gozer ruled, a future where Egon never died, a planet without Ghostbusters at all. In each vision, they saw the cost of inaction, the necessity of what they were. And at the bottom, waiting like an idea ready to bloom, was it? The architect, not a god, not a ghost, pattern, woven into the laws of the universe. The architect revealed the truth. The ghost field wasn't an accident. It was the nervous system of the cosmos. Every soul, every death, every story, it all fed the architect. It designed realities, tried outcomes, spun multiverses like a loom. And Earth had become self-aware. That was the problem. They weren't meant to know, to meddle, to intervene. The Ghostbusters had disrupted the cycle. contained the uncontainable, turned entropy into art. The architect offered them a choice: dissolve and return to the pattern, or remake the loom. They chose the second. Together, old and new, they bound their minds through the cradle's core. They rerouted the spectral lattice, redesigned causality, wrote new laws with PKE signatures and the essence of choice. The architect did not resist. It adapted. It watched. And then it vanished. The rift closed. The firehouse remained, now a monument and a living machine. Ghosts still came, still needed help. But now the world understood. Ghosts weren't just lost. They were memory, emotion, warning, hope. And the Ghostbusters were not just hunters. They were guides, tellers of truth, architects of their own. The proton streams hummed in harmony with the universe, no longer fighting the spectral tide, but dancing with it. And above it all, in the beacon's signal across space and time, one phrase repeated in harmonic resonance: "We believe you." The ghosts listened. The stars sang back. And the Ghostbusters watched the future unfold, not with fear, but with light in their hearts and unshakable unity in their steps.